So there you are, playing through strikes after getting home from school or work. You slap on that Well of Radiance and tighten up those Lunafaction boots, stomping bosses left and right without a care in the world. Every boss you see, you run up to it, put down that well and point and click and say goodbye. You go to bed that night dreaming of all the bosses you're gonna one-phase when you wake up tomorrow morning. Then morning arrives and as you wake up, you look at your phone. You see notification. Lunafaction boots is getting nerfed. You collapse to the floor. They did the unthinkable. Lunafaction boots was all you had left. And they ruined it. Warlock is ruined. The entire game pointless. There's no reason to play anymore. You might as well just uninstall the game, cancel your Shadowkeep pre-order, and burn all traces of the Destiny franchise from your life. Thanks to Bungie, your world has gone to shambles, and you're going to be living on the street before you know it. But what if it doesn't have to be that way? Hey, thanks for clicking on this video, and today I want to explain to all of you lovely internet surfers why nerfing Lunafaction boots and Rally Barricade is actually for the better. Now, before you scroll down to the comments calling me another one of those streamer, content creator, Bungie shills, oh, what? You already left the comment? Well, alright, since you're still here though, let me try and explain my perspective on this whole earth-shattering design decision that we refer to as a nerf. Most of you watching are already well acquainted with the Lunafaction boots exotic for the Warlocks and the Rally Barricade class ability for the Titans. If you're just kind of passing by and don't really have the knowledge of all this stuff, the exotic boots and the class ability each do the same thing. They make it so you never have to reload. You can empty all of your ammo and your weapons without stopping to reload once. It sounds pretty strong, right? Yeah, that's because it is. I'd say it's the strongest feature that's currently in the game, since no other exotic or ability allows you to increase your damage output to the same extent. Now the interesting thing here is that these two are not the only auto-reloading features in the game, even though they might feel like it. You actually have a bunch of other exotics and a variety of other subclass perks that affect your ability to reload as well. But none of them can do what Lunafaction boots can. Lunafaction boots, and to a slightly lesser extent Rally Barricade, are able to make all those other exotics irrelevant because not only do you not have to reload, but as long as everybody with you is standing in your rift while you're wearing those boots or behind your barricade, nobody has to reload. An entire team of 3 to 6 players never has to reload their weapons once. Now this creates a few problems. Actually, who am I kidding? This creates a shitload of problems. So let's talk about what those problems are and why Bungie wants to wean us off the addiction that is these auto-reloading mechanics. One of the biggest reasons Lunafaction boots and Rally Barricade are getting nerfed is because it allows players to circumvent the entire part of the game that is reloading. This was originally brought up in the director's cut and is easily the biggest factor in the decision to nerf them. Lunafaction boots, as satisfying as the buff is, has completely spoiled all of us. In Destiny 1, auto-reloading on this level didn't exist. There was no feature that allowed the player to completely ignore the entire mechanic of a first-person shooter that is reloading. Reloading is something that the player should have to consider when facing an encounter. That's the whole point of a loader and enhanced loader perks. That's the point of a quick reload perk on weapons. And it's important to make the player weigh their options when it comes to reloading. Do they want to bring a weapon that does more DPS but reloads slower? Or do they want to bring a weapon that does less DPS but reloads really fast? Should you bring loader perks or a certain subclass that buffs reload speed? All of this strategizing and min-maxing goes away when you can simply equip an exotic or use an ability that takes care of all of those things for everyone around you. I equate this feature to a cheat code in a game, and Lunafactions to me is something that I've dubbed a cheat code exotic. A handful of these exotics exist in Destiny 2, and they are so strong that they are the equivalent of turning on a cheat code in the menus. Now hear me out. If you played Halo Reach a lot, you'll probably remember an option called bottomless clip. This was a setting you could turn on in the custom games options that said that the player never had to reload their weapon. Now granted, it's not 100% identical because it also gives you infinite ammo, but the point is it was under the settings to modify weapons and damage in the infinite ammo category. Turning on this option was like entering a cheat code to get a bottomless clip, and that's both pretty awesome and pretty overpowered. It's not just a casual setting you may or may not want to switch on, and to me that's exactly what Lunafaction boots and Rally Barricade are. It's equipping an exotic or using an ability that lets you just completely cheat. It's completely removing an aspect of the game that you would otherwise have to manage. What this does is turns any encounter and any boss into a stand in this well and don't stop clicking the fire button, which is extremely boring to play and extremely boring to watch. Is it satisfying to one-phase bosses? Yeah, it is. But is that kind of gameplay really stimulating? I mean, I personally think that the novelty of one-phasing things gets old really fast. Now, there's nothing wrong with enjoying the ability to one-phase bosses. I mean, heck, it's become the norm these days. So much so that if you don't one-phase every boss in the game, it feels like a huge letdown. Like, ugh, we actually have to do the encounters again and can't just get easy loot from pointing and clicking on the boss's head? How awful. And because it's become so normalized to one-phase everything, that as soon as you get that ability taken away, you have to completely readjust to the new pace of gameplay, and this disruptive change is going to annoy a lot of people. Which is why these two things should have been nerfed a long time ago, because now that they become such a core part of the game, taking them away feels like you're removing a part of the experience that players have come to expect. Negating any reason to care about reloading is only one downside to Luna's and Rally though. Let's talk more about how it directly affects the actual content. This nerf to auto-reloading is going to be coupled with a change to how buffs work in Shadowkeep. You'll no longer be able to stack multiple buffs together because, well, currently it's completely broken and allows you to reach damage outputs that shouldn't even exist. And these changes are being made in order to preserve the challenge of the game. Because let's face it, we all know Destiny 2 PvE is at a point where it is mind-numbingly easy. Just the other day, some blueberries in my strike were able to insta-kill the Brakazan boss before we even got to the top of the lift. Heck, I got to fire maybe 2 anarchy shots before he was dead. We didn't even make it to the boss room and he was already defeated. I could go on and on about how you can literally punch a raid boss to death by yourself in a few seconds, or completely destroy a Primeval in Gambit solo with 1 stack of Primeval Slayer. There's power fantasy, and then there's playing in God mode, which is exactly how the game feels right now in 90% of the content. Even in new content like Crown of Sorrows, the raid that was one-phased on day 1, while the contest modifier, which puts a cap on your power level, was still active. And the exact same thing was going to happen again in Garden of Salvation and all of Shadowkeep's new content if something as big as buff stacking and auto-reloading wasn't nerfed. The current state of the game allows players to cut all of the content in the game short and still get the loot faster and easier than ever before. And I know there are those of you out there who say, but Ethan, I like how easy and mindless the game is, and I like being able to just chill out and kill things and not have to think while feeling like a god. And you know what? I totally get that. But here's the issue. When content is too easy, there's no incentive to improve. No reason to go above and beyond and aspire to be a better player. To learn the ins and outs of the game, to experiment or try new loadouts and new builds. And all of this leads to less triumphant and exciting moments of overcoming something difficult. That's not saying all the content in the game should be really hard. No, absolutely not. But I think an overall rise in difficulty in Shadowkeep is going to be great for the game. That said, I think giving players more choice is also important. There's a lot of different people who play a game like Destiny, and they should have a choice to increase the difficulty or lower the difficulty of certain content so they can play the way they want. This is why I'm very happy to see difficulty options returning. Being able to select a lower tier difficulty if you just want to chill out and blast through content is just as important as being able to select higher tier difficulties. But things like cheat code exotics are like taking the entire game, regardless of how hard it is, and dropping the difficulty down to easy mode. It ruins the experience across the entire game for everyone. And before you say, well, then just don't use it, let's get real for a second. Are you seriously suggesting that people should purposefully handicap themselves and introduce artificial difficulty to make the game harder because you don't want to try? Come on now, that's just stupid. I'm not going to run sun bracers just because I want an encounter to feel more challenging. Not to mention, we all got on fine without auto-reloading abilities in Destiny 1, and I always hear about how everyone says they think Destiny 1 is better, so returning to that should be a good thing, no? So not only does Luna's and Rally hurt the game because all the content in it can be beaten in about half the time it should be, but another issue with the current state of the auto-reloading mechanics is how badly they overshadow other interesting exotics. If you're a warlock in a raid and you're in a boss encounter, 10 out of 10 times you're running Lunafaction boots, unless another warlock is already. And you'd be crazy not to. There is no other choice, no other exotic in the game that's going to help your team one-phase Riven better than Lunafaction boots can. And that's a huge issue because you have one exotic that is so good and so important that no matter how much you buff something else, it's always going to be better than 99% of the other exotics in the game. I mean, seriously, how do you make an exotic or an ability that is stronger than something that reloads 6 people's weapons for them? Again, it's really just a cheat code exotic, which in my opinion, all super regen exotics are. They completely overshadow any exotics that may be decent or offer an interesting playstyle because the cheat codes are so strong, you're actually hurting yourself and your teammates by trying to use something else. I mean, you could use something else, but it would be so inefficient it's neither fun or helpful in any way. There are 75 exotic armor pieces currently in Destiny 2, with a few more on the way in Shadowkeep, but there's probably about 3 exotics per class that people actually use in endgame content. Those 3 exotics stay glued to your hip, and you never take them off, which is fine for some, but holy shit is it boring. This is partially because Bungie hasn't seriously given any buffs to any exotic armor in a long time, which is depressing and needs to be changed. But even if they did, nothing is going to be able to compete with never having to reload or instantly getting your super back. Those exotics will always be top tier unless you either remove them or rework them. Just think about how many exotics Lunafaction boots is making irrelevant right now because of how strong it is. Ophidian Asphyx, the Warlock gauntlets that increase your reload speed, Actium War Rig, the Titan chest piece that steadily reloads your auto rifle, Sealed Ahamkar's Grasps, the Hunter gauntlets that reload your weapons on a melee kill, Dragon Shadow, the Hunter chest piece that reloads all your weapons at once with a dodge, Peacekeepers, the Titan leg armor that reloads your stowed submachine gun and increases your ready and movement speed with them. And those are just the exotics that affect reload speed. There are so many cool exotics that actually do useful things and could open up entirely new playstyles or add more meaningful choices to your gameplay, but are just being completely overshadowed by the same exotic armor that has reigned supreme since launch 2 years ago. Why would you use any of those other reload exotics when you have Lunafaction boots that does all of those things but better? Buffing bad exotics would, at the very least, spice up the meta, but it'll accomplish nothing if the top tier stuff isn't reworked. I'm sure there's a bunch of you out there that are just like me and are tired of being encouraged to use the same exact exotics in every single encounter. Really, the point of this video was to try and explain why things like Lunafactions, while fun, are not entirely healthy for the game. To summarize the points I made earlier, Rally and Lunas cause the following problems. It allows players to completely circumvent the reloading aspect of the game, which is basically cheating, which then in turn makes the game too easy, reduces any challenge and cuts content in half, making it quicker to get rewards and meaning you have to play and experience the content less. And finally, it overshadows exotics and limits potential builds and loadouts, keeping classes stuck to the same handful of exotics. Even if you don't fully agree, hopefully you can see where I'm coming from and why this nerf is a good thing for the game. Just like Destiny 1, it'll be just fine. We're just going to have to play a little bit smarter in the future, and to me that sounds like a more interesting game. Let me know how you're feeling in the comments, and thank you very much for listening.